name is Andrea. I am your moderator for this evening. I am with Inspira Advantage. I'll let my co-host here introduce himself momentarily. But yeah, a little bit about tonight's session. So tonight's session, we're doing a free MCAT workshop all about cars. To give you a little bit of a rundown of what tonight's going to look like. We're hoping to run this for an hour. So we need your attention. We're excited to have it. This webinar is recorded and you will receive a recording in your inbox within a day or two. If by some chance you don't, each of you received an email to be here, just let us know and we'll make sure to get that to you. In terms of what are we looking at? What is the structure of tonight's call? So we'll be speaking about how to tackle each CARS question, practicing CARS outside of the test. You'll get expert advice, and then we love to do a Q&A. So get your questions in, whether it be about CARS, whether it be about just the MCAT in general, maybe the application process. We want to make sure that we give you that ability to speak to our wonderful experts. We have one more awesome individual joining us, but she's having some technical difficulties. But yes, we want to make sure that we give you all the time that you need and make sure that we answer every question to the best of our ability. Yeah, and we're really excited to have you here if I have not mentioned that already. Can you tell? So a little bit about who we are, because not everybody knows. This may be your first time joining us, or maybe you've heard of us, but you've never been to one of our webinars. Nonetheless, we're excited. So we're Inspira Advantage. We're a globally recognized admissions consulting and test prep firm with over 16 years of experience. I almost said 15 years of experience. We specialize in helping students gain admission to top graduate healthcare programs, including medical, residency, dental, veterinary, PA, and nursing programs with a 94% acceptance rate. We believe in starting early, which is why we offer something called pre-health advising for college freshmen. So what do we do? How do we help our students? Well, we help students by building a tailored academic timeline, including course selection and GPA strategy, finding impactful experiences like research, shadowing, clinical and non-clinical volunteering, extracurriculars, and leadership roles. And then we help them make their applications stand out from the rest with stellar personal statements and, of course, interview prep. Now, what these steps do is they lay a strong foundation to help our applicants differentiate themselves from the rest and really leave a lasting impact. In addition, our tutors provide customized one-on-one test prep for MCAT, DAT, and GRE. So we begin with diagnostic tests, then we move into custom study plans and interim progress tracking. Our students see score increases on average of about 15 points on the MCAT with 45 plus hours of tutoring. And then with our 60-hour program, we have a score guarantee of 515 on the MCAT. When it comes time to apply, we have something called an all-inclusive application program, which offers unlimited support through the entire application cycle. So this includes crafting a personalized narrative and school lists, perfecting personal statements and secondary essays with unlimited edits, providing interview prep, scholarship guidance, and waitlist strategy. We are very much with you until the very end. So again, we're with our students until you receive that acceptance to that dream school, whatever it may be. Our goal is very clear, very simple, and it's to really create the most competitive candidates and applications, ensuring that our students shine in this competitive admissions landscape. Let me tell you, it's getting more and more competitive each year. If you'd like to learn more, we do offer personalized consultations via video, phone, or email. No matter where you are in the application process, we're here to help you. We're here to support you. Yes, I'd love to pass it over. Aryaman, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for that awesome kind of breakdown of what Inspira can do to help you all. And good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining, especially people on the East Coast. Shout out to my friends from Indiana. That's where I'm from. It's always fun to see other people from there, especially such a small state. But my name is Aryaman Gupta. Just a quick little bit about me. Like I said, I grew up in Indiana, but wanted to explore the world beyond the cornfield. So I went to Duke University in North Carolina, where I studied biomedical engineering. Actually didn't plan on going into medicine and worked as a little bit as an engineer, but realized that wasn't the path for me. So I applied to medical school. Very fortunate to have then gone to Johns Hopkins up in Baltimore, where I did my med school. And now actually I'm staying back in Baltimore as an interventional radiology resident at Johns Hopkins. And I've been working with Inspira for a few years now, as well as a tutor and a counselor. So I can definitely speak to its value and its benefit. And again, thanks for joining us, and hope we can make this as useful and informative for all of you. And I'd like to pass it on to my co-panelist here now.
Oh, you're muted. Do you want to try leaving the call and coming back on? Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right, I'm just gonna, we'll move on to this quick slide, and once Archana's back, we'll give her a chance. See if it works now.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. It's nice to meet all of you. My name is Archana. I am from Northern California, so I grew up in Cupertino. And then I went to Cornell for undergrad, where I studied neuroscience. I considered an MD PhD track and ended up applying broadly to both MD PhD programs and MD programs. I ultimately ended up going for an MD track at Harvard in the Harvard MIT research program. And I'm currently a head and neck surgery resident at UCSD. So happy to help you out with this CARS curriculum. And if you have any questions, we're always available to answer that.
Great. I'll start, and Archana and I will kind of bounce back between slides here. And towards the end, we'll do a little bit of practice and share with you guys some tips and tricks that we think are going to be helpful when you all do end up taking the MCAT. So what exactly is CARS, right? I know when people study it, it feels really random or esoteric or like just frustrating, truly, because a lot of people doing the MCAT, they're more used to things that are based in science or foundation, it seems like, or formula based, right? But if you break down CARS, there actually is a pattern and specific things that the test taker or test makers want you to understand. And so by knowing how they're forming these questions and what they want out of you as a test taker, it can actually help you figure out your approach to each question and then get better at finding the right answer. So it's truly a section of practice and understanding what the test makers want for you to learn. Next slide, please.
So for the CARS passages, it's helpful to think of it as a tiered system. So on your first read, you can try to extract what the big picture is of the CARS passage. What kind of argument is the reader making? Who is the speaker of the passage? Are there multiple speakers in the passage? And once you get a quick first pass in, you want to try to read each paragraph actively and closely. And so we'll go through an exercise with an example passage today, but you want to try to circle words that are transitional, that indicate a shift in tone or a shift in argument. You also want to highlight quotes. And sometimes you can highlight quotes and look at the questions and answer choices to see if they will later show up as a testable item. And so it helps to try to get a big picture first and then read each paragraph very closely to pick out specific details that test takers will, want to quiz you on. And as you read through more passages, these test taking snippets will become more and more clear. You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I think this really follows up on what Archana was saying, that you have to have a keen eye. Once you do these, things will truly actually jump out at you. Like she said, transitional words or key points or quotes. And you want to be able to distill each section of the passage into your own words. A lot of times these can be very dense or just long passages, and it's easy to get tired. So figure out what each part is trying to say, and you have to be able to describe it in your own words as if you were teaching it to somebody, because that means that you actually did understand what they were trying to say, or at least got close to it. And then once you boil down each section, connect them together so you can make a logical argument as if you were the writer of the passage itself.
So one concrete way to do this is to try to summarize each paragraph in 1 or 2 sentences. And this is something that you may do, consciously with your early passages, but as you see more and more passages, you'll end up doing this on your own without having to write it down. But you want to be able to come up with a key argument and a statement about the tone of that paragraph. And another thing that you can do, get in the habit of doing, is to try to back up every statement you make about the passage with evidence from the passage. And so evidence can mean keywords or sentences that are used in the passage, or references that are made within the passage. So everything that you circle in your answer should have a sentence or a word that you can map it back to in the passage. Otherwise, you're at risk of extrapolating, which is fairly easy to do with complex passages. But when you're first starting, try to write a sentence by sentence outline of each of the paragraphs. And when you go to your questions, try to circle keywords and phrases that support your answer, almost like you're making an argument, an evidence-based argument for the multiple choice option that you pick.
So I just want to quickly hop in and just say that we want to take just a quick check-in break and look at any sort of questions that there may be in the chat. And I do see a question, so I think we can get to it just momentarily. But before we do that, a quick just thank you for being on the call. We'd love to offer everyone on this call and those viewing at home a 10% off discount on any one of our programs. And then if you scan that QR code, that actually takes you back to a page where you're able to book a one-on-one consultation. So if you have any additional questions, or you'd like to speak about your application profile, or you'd like to speak about the MCAT, or anything about this process, one of my wonderful colleagues will be able to sit down with you. One of our awesome admissions counselors will be able to sit with you and get those questions answered and really additionally support you along the way. With that being said, the first question is, for a student just finished second year university, is it okay for one to take the MCAT? This sort of 3 questions. The second question is, does the knowledge good enough to cover the MCAT exam? I guess that's referring to what they've learned so far up until the second year. And then somebody said all CARS exams answers are inside the question body. Is that right? With respect to the second part, you are correct that all of the knowledge that you need for the CARS passages will be within the passage itself. So you don't need to bring in any outside knowledge to be able to complete the CARS section. And that can actually lead you astray and make you pick questions that answer choices that aren't actually directly from the passage itself. So you should be able to take the CARS exam pretty much at any point in your college career. With respect to the first question, it depends. So many universities, students don't take biochemistry until their 3rd year. So biochemistry is a significant portion of the exam, and you should feel like you have a good handle on that material before you take it, or you should feel confident that you would be able to self-study it, but generally would not recommend that for such a dense portion of the exam. You will also have to have good foundation in systems biology. So generally, if you've taken a cell biology course, which you would within most first or second year university tracks in the biology department, you should be covered for that. You should have a good handle on physics, on organic chemistry, and general chemistry. So some programs may defer organic chemistry until their 3rd year, but as long as you have taken that, it's certainly reasonable to start studying and then take the exam once you feel like you have a good handle on all of these topics. And the last one is psychology, which you don't have to necessarily take a course for, but it's helpful.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly add on to that because I actually took it after my 2nd year. And I think, like mentioned, it has to be for the right person in the right situation. I took it because I was doing biomedical engineering, and taking the MCAT while doing the junior year course load for BME was just going to be impractical. And so I spent that summer between 2nd and 3rd year self-studying for most of the MCAT. It was Not a great time. It was tough. But I'm very happy I made that decision, because then I could have focused my third year on doing my courses for university. So it's possible. People do it. Don't be afraid to do it, but make sure it's an informed decision you're making if you do that.
Amazing. So there's one more question. I think we'll answer this one, and then we can get on to the rest of the presentation, because we do have that a walkthrough coming up. Is there anything you would suggest when it comes to biochem self-study?
It's a challenging topic to self-study, so it's always helpful to have taken a course first. That would be your, first line. But if you are to self-study, different people have different approaches, but I can share what I did. I had taken a biochemistry course, and then I got 2 review books that worked well for me, MCAT review books, and I divided them chapter by chapter. I also had a biochemistry textbook that I studied alongside each chapter in the MCAT prep books. So the MCAT prep books give you a good big picture overview and are generally comprehensive if you've taken coursework in the area, but then you can map each chapter that you cover in the MCAT book to a chapter in the textbook and make your own, subject by subject outline. The textbook that I used actually matched the table of contents of the AAMC content outline. And so that way I could make sure that what I covered actually was on the MCAT curriculum. And so there's a couple different textbooks that will coordinate their chapters to the AAMC subject outline.
Aryaman, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that was awesomely comprehensive.
Awesome. Okay. So I will pass it back to you.
Yeah, so common traps to avoid in cars, and I think one of them was perfectly mentioned, that you have all the knowledge you need within the passage, and sometimes it might not feel like that, that they're asking something that just doesn't make sense, or you just can't tie it to something in the passage, but it actually truly is there. So don't necessarily overthink or try to bring in outside knowledge. And so a lot of times people will overthink the passage. And I think this is one section where you can actually sometimes trust your gut. Because when you're kind of reading these passages, subconsciously, you're distilling it and remembering what it's trying to say. And sometimes you can just like feel what's the right answer, but then obviously back it up. And then the most common thing that I see that students do, that's a mistake, is rushing. It is a tiring section. You're reading a lot, and sometimes really dense and complex passages, and it's easy to just blitz through it, not really retain anything, and then try to guess your way through the answers, and that is always going to end up poorly. So the time you invest in reading the passage carefully, you'll actually make it up later on when you go through the multiple choice. And remember that if you're stuck on a set of answers and you can't figure out which was the right one, always just eliminate the wrong ones. Make it easier for yourself, right? Instead of 25%, get it down to like a 50% chance of picking between 2 answers. So take your time, and it will help you down the road.
Archana, are you still there?
Let's continue. So
yeah, looks like she's having some technical difficulties.
No worries. And when you read these passages, you have to sometimes put yourself in the shoes of the author, because they're the ones who obviously only truly know what they're trying to imply with the passage. So understand the point that they're trying to make and the way that they're supporting their thesis statement. Are they doing it in a passive or active way? Are they proving it with examples that are based in facts, or is it more metaphorical and philosophical? So understand the way that they're presenting what their thesis statement is, and then be able to figure out what is that thesis statement, and is there any kind of fluff around it that they're using to drive home their point. Something that's really important is if there's a statement or sentence that has 2 contrasting points or 2 counterpoints, that's usually going to be relevant. Or anything that appears to have two sides of a coin, or like an analogy where you're comparing one thing to another, those types of sentences and statements are what the test makers really like to hone in on. And then practicing cars just beyond the test. Obviously, I think this is a dream. Yeah, I know that many of you don't, have a whole lot of time, especially between studying and doing all the other things you're doing to even prepare to apply for medical school. But the more you read, the better it actually is going to serve you, because you're going to see such a variety of perspectives and writing styles and ways that writers form arguments, that when you see the cars passages, you won't be so taken aback. It's, I love sports and I love reading ESPN articles, but that's not really going to help me too much when it comes to cars, because that's just not the style of writing that's being presented. It's more the stuff you'll see in newspapers or books or editorials or reviews, opinion pieces. That's what they're going to draw material from. So just be familiar with it as much as you can. Continuing on this, what you can do on a day-to-day basis that's more than just practice. I think it just goes to what we said. The more you can read, and then what you can go on the level beyond reading, right? It's, can you read a passage and explain it to somebody or teach it to someone, right? I think this is what we can say true about any subject. If you can teach it, that's the greatest form of proving that you know what's happening, or you know the material. So easier said than done, but you can find a study buddy, right? And you guys can read two different passages or the same passage and explain it to the other person about what's going on and the meaning of that passage. Those are things you can do in your day-to-day life to help you out. So there are 3 skills mentioned here, and I think all are really important, but in my opinion, the biggest one that comes down to is time management. Again, I've said this multiple times, it's a very tiring section. At the beginning, you're going to feel great. You're going to be reading super carefully, analyzing each word in each sentence, trying to figure out what's going on. And I promise you that level of energy is going to fade over the session. It is natural. The whole day is long, but being able to build up that endurance and timing yourself, right? There's only typically a certain amount of passages in the whole car section, right? That doesn't change dramatically. And so knowing how much time you can dedicate to each passage and its questions will help keep you on track. So, you break it down. If you have 10 minutes for this passage, you spend the first 5 reading it as carefully as you can. And if there's 5 questions, you spend a minute per question. And so just watching that timer and making sure you're on track will help you for sections at the end, giving yourself enough time that you don't guess your way through and lose on points that you could have easily gotten.
And ways to know that you're improving, as the slide says, you can track your progress by actively reviewing your tests. If it's too, time consuming to sit through a whole test and a set of passages, you can break up an exam into, individual passages or 2 passages at a time to build your stamina. And I've often heard the question, which test prep company should I use? How do I know if I'm doing well? There can be significant discrepancy in how you do on one company's exam versus another. To track improvement, the best way is to try to stick to one company and see how you do on their passages before you switch over to another company. But generally, you should have enough passages available, just sticking to one set of materials. And if you're worried that when you do AAMC exams and you feel like your scores aren't translating, then you can think about adding in more materials. But overall, you can try to build your stamina by working passage by passage and then working on 2 at a time and then 3 at a time, and then track your progress, within passages that are written by the same group before you move on to another set. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to tutors or, our team to help you with that process.
It sounds like this is kind of where we come in. We're, quote unquote, the experts, whatever, what that means. But I think it all comes down to exposure and experience. And you all can be the experts by just spending as much time as possible that you can. And the key here is quality over quantity. I know that a lot with MCAT prep and studying, people say practice, 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 right? But that doesn't mean volume. That means actually taking the time to treat each passage and each question as if it's the real deal. When, I have students starting out, I personally encourage them to turn off the timer, right? Focus on spending your time and energy for each passage and question, thinking through each answer choice and finding the right one. And then you'll get better at doing it quicker and getting into that time constraint. And another thing that happens when tutoring students is that sometimes you'll just know the right answer, and that's great. And when the test day comes, that's probably what you're going to do. You're going to know the right answer. You're going to pick it and you're going to move on. But when you're prepping, that's not enough. If you're being, tutored or whatever it may be, you need to be able to justify why you picked that answer, right? You can't just say, well, it feels right. Point to a part of the passage that says, this is the right answer, or these other three answers are not the right answer. And if you can do that regularly, then the section is going to be a breeze for you when test day comes, because the foundation you have built is not just going to be on feeling or gut. It's going to be on the experience you've gained by picking the right evidence-based answer. And lastly, a lot of the MCAT is mental. Prep matters, but being in the right headspace in the mindset test day can make a big difference in your score. So if you can come in kind of with as much as possible a relaxed mindset, right? Tune out all of the noise and all the stress and really just focus on you and the question, you're gonna have a much clearer mind and be able to find the answer. And again, I know test day nerves and all that are real and it happens. And so this is something you really just have to train your own mindset and your headspace to be as clear as possible.
So what I'd love to do is I'm going to pull up a passage, and our two panelists will do their thing and sort of guide you through the mental portion of it, talk about a little bit about the strategies, et cetera, et cetera. So give me a moment. I'm going to pull that up. Can you see my screen yet?
Yep, you can see it.
Okay. Would you like me to zoom in? Perfect.
So to everybody on the call, do your best to try to read through this passage. Take some notes along the way. We'll scroll through this slowly. And then we're going to present some questions based off this passage. I encourage you all to type your answer into the chat, not because we're checking or we care. It's because it's helpful for you to commit to an answer, and then we'll review what the correct and the incorrects were. So I do encourage you to put that in chat. And when we discuss it, we'll give our thoughts, and we also encourage you guys to put in the chat or speak up if there's something that drew you to an answer, or to reason it out loud with us, because that's what we're here for, to make this as interactive as possible, because it's not us speaking to you is not going to help you learn. So work with us, make this interactive, and we'll think it helps. So read through this. We'll scroll through it slowly. Try to take some notes along the way about what you think each paragraph is trying to say, or what the passage is trying to say as a whole.
And there's a really great question in the chat that's asking for some practice resources. The passage you see on your screen is actually from a practice test that we have. It's a full-length practice test. I can ensure that everybody on this call And anybody who has this recording, obviously, will be able to get a copy of it. So that'll help you with your studying and your preparations. We'll give everyone a minute maybe to read before we start scrolling. Aryaman, why don't you tell me when you think it's okay for me to scroll?
Yeah, I think let's scroll to the next couple paragraphs.
Aryaman, maybe you can give some advice on things that they can look for when reviewing these passages, like little tips, tricks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And we'll talk more about these kind of when we get to the questions. But when you're reading the passage, like we said, put yourself in the shoes of the author. In which way are they making their argument? Are they being very definitive and forceful about it, or are they taking a more passive approach? What are they trying to imply, and how are they supporting that? Are they supporting that with, again, facts, or are they supporting that with analogies? I think one thing I'll point out specifically in the paragraph at the top, you see here, right? That's a very clear form of an analogy. This book is such an alarm call. It reminds this author of the great bells and the watchtowers of the cities of the Middle Ages, right? So he's comparing the book directly to watchtower sounding an alarm. So, and it's in quotes. So, well, I guess the whole thing's quote, but point is, contrasting statements like this, where things are being compared, are most likely going to be relevant in the future. So try to find moments like that through the passage.
Amazing. I think we'll continue scrolling. And it's okay if you're missing something, or if you aren't able to completely read the passage. The point being, just sort of getting familiar with the language, getting familiar with the way sentences are phrased, et cetera, et cetera.
I think this is another part where you can notice a bit of a tone change, right? Earlier, we're talking about forceful things like the alarm bells of the watchtowers. And now we're seeing where it's like, fortunately, the tide of destruction is ebbing, right? So we're taking a positive tone, or a different take on what's happening. So something has transitioned or changed in the way the author is presenting the argument.
Somebody just asked if they'll be receiving a copy of this passage or the whole practice exam. They'll be receiving the whole practice exam. It's 341 pages long. So yes, it's a full-length practice exam. And you're very welcome. Aryaman, should I continue scrolling?
Yeah, let's go ahead and scroll.
Aryaman, did you want to start with the questions?
Yeah, so I think before we jump into this, we have about 20 minutes left. We'll spend about kind of 10 minutes doing this and then taking a couple minutes for questions from you all. I don't know if someone wants to volunteer. If you want, put something in the chat, speak up if, I don't know if that's possible with this. Just,
Of course, we can unmute anyone
yeah,
that would like to be unmuted, or put it in the chat.
yeah, take a shot at what is happening in this passage. What is the author's thesis statement? And don't be shy. Like, it's okay. No one's judging, but I also understand if you don't feel comfortable. So take a shot if you want. Okay, great. I see urging to preserve nature, protect the environment. Great. All right. So at least we're all on the same page of what the heck is happening, right? At least the author's not trying to say destroy the earth or something crazy. So we're on the right track of what's going on. All right. And then I think the next thing that would be helpful is, Andrea, can you scroll up? We'll do this for a couple paragraphs. Just go to let's say the first paragraph.
The very first paragraph?
Very first paragraph of the passage.
Absolutely. Bear with me, everyone. There you go. First paragraph.
All right. So one tip that you feel commonly recommended is to pick out keywords in a paragraph or a phrase, or being able to distill what a paragraph means. So take a shot, either the first or second paragraph. I want you to put in the chat if you see any really keywords that jump out to you, or if you're able to distill what that specific paragraph is saying. What is the point of that one paragraph?
You should have access to underline and whatnot. So if you want to go ahead and underline these sort of passages or anything, Aryaman, you should be able to do that.
Great. So I'm seeing people mentioning words like imperative duty. Great. So it's, again, the tone of the word is very impactful and forceful. I think this is another important phrase that you're seeing here: sentimental, educational, and legislative. That it's not just one way in which this needs to happen, right? We have to make laws that enforce this. There has to be an educational part of it, and then a sentimental. People have to have an emotional feeling or an attachment to doing this. So if the author is going to try to make an argument about all of these different spheres, in the second paragraph, right? I think this is a super important key. It cannot be won by gentle tones. This really fits in with this author's tone of, we're getting past the point of just simple platitudes or trying to encourage people to do this. And then if you look at this phrase here, right? Nor by appeals to the aesthetic instincts of those who have no sense of beauty or enjoyment of nature, right? So it's going to take people, he's saying, or he or she is saying, that to fix or preserve nature, we cannot rely on people who don't have an appreciation of what nature is. Words like loud alarm, right? So you see this contrast between gentle tones and loud alarm. Cannot be won by gentle tones, must be a loud alarm. Again, that this is a sense of urgency, right? When you hear an alarm, it's not because, there's a fire alarm doesn't mean there's a fire going to happen in an hour. It's the fire is happening now. So words like that things have to be backed up by statistics. Again, tracing back to the educational part of it. Photographs which tell no lies, factually based, and to establish and enforce the law. If it needs to be with a bludgeon, right? So every paragraph is going to have a lot of keywords, but if you had to distill this, the 2 paragraphs are basically saying that the time is now. We need to fix it aggressively and forcefully. And that is what he's trying to imply, he or she's trying to imply in this passage. And so I encourage you to do this, especially the first time around, with each paragraph, and it will take time, and that's okay. Don't worry about time when you're first trying to start out with cars. It's quality over quantity. So I think I kind of understood what this is trying to say. So Andre, if we could go down to the first question, we'll start there. Great. All right. So the first question here is, which of the following types of arguments does the author fail to utilize in this passage? And I'll let you read the answer. So take about 30 seconds, try to reason through each of these answers on your own, and then go ahead and type the answer in the chat. And again, it's not because I or anybody in this call cares what you put the answer. It's for you to commit to something, and then we'll talk through it. So we'll take about 30 seconds. All right, I'm seeing a lot of answers for B. That's great. Not going to say if that's right or wrong at this point, but let's talk through it. Does someone who said B want to volunteer why they might have picked that? Again, totally okay if not, but I appreciate you guys putting in an answer choice, right? Great, thank you, Kelly. So let's talk through this specific question, right? Question 36, right? Yep. So which of the following types of arguments does the author fail to utilize in this passage? So let's look at answer choice A. The use of analogies meant to draw upon images familiar to the audience. Does anybody remember a specific analogy that was highlighted or the author used in this question that you can point to rule out? Great, perfect. You guys nailed it, right? So he clearly makes that analogy, like we point out, about the alarm call. Perfect. So we can rule that out because we have direct evidence showing that A is not going to be the answer. Let's skip answer B. Let's go to answer C real quickly. So answer C is the offering of normative judgments that are meant to motivate action. So again, I know it's hard because you don't have the passage pulled up, but he actually does make a lot of statements, right, to motivate action. So he said in the first paragraph, I'm pretty sure he says that it's one of the foremost duties of men and women of today. It is an imperative duty, right? So he is motivating action by saying it is the duty. And the reason it's normative is because the opposite of that would be descriptive. He's not using descriptive language in that sentence. He's just being very clear and factual that this is a job, we all need to do it. And so I think that's why answer C you can rule out. And I think you all did a really good job of ruling it out. So it gets down to answer B and D at this point. So let's look at answer B, right? Appeals to authority and claims of demonstrated past success. So this is something you have to pick out actually in the later paragraphs of this. And I think this goes back to, you're going to pay great attention to the first couple paragraphs, but don't skip over the last ones. So if you look at the last paragraph, he actually says the words, noting his own long and successful appearance. Later on, if you read the paragraph about the Zoological Society, right, he says that he has been endorsed by the New York Zoological Society. And I think the specific phrases really stands out. It says that this work or this book, right, no one is more devoted to this great cause than William T. Hornaday. He is basically saying that no one is better for this than himself. Because if you look at the end, it says, where is the text from? The text is from the book. So the author of the book in the book is saying that he's the best person for this cause. Arguably a little bit callous, but whatever that may be. So he is making appeals to his authority and the authority of the New York Zoological Society, and that showing that because of its success. And I think that's why you can actually rule out answer B. So the answer to this question is actually D. There are no moments where he's making philosophical justifications, right? If you look at those first couple paragraphs, he's using words like taking photographs or basing things in facts. So he wants to convince others based off of factual evidence and not just philosophical reasons. Later on in the passage, there's things about the destruction of cliffs and homes of different animals. That doesn't really fit under philosophical justification. Philosophical means that bringing in the concept of like harmony or something that just can't really be explained well. And so again, I think it's close between B and D, but you can make evidence to show that B is in the passage and therefore not the right answer. So very long-winded answer, but that's the value of being able to go through each answer choice and ruling things out. We'll do the 37 really quickly because I think that one's quick, and then we can just leave a couple minutes for questions from you all. All right. Author supports his overarching claim by arguing for the importance of all of the following except. So basically, which of these ideas is not present in the passage? And feel free, again, I encourage you all to just quickly type out an answer and see what you think. Great. I see a lot of answer choices for A. I see ones for C. Great. Again, we'll go through all these. Can someone tell me what clemency means? Yeah, and I think a big part of CARS is also going to be just vocabulary and reading comprehension. So I think clemency is a word that sometimes typically not everyone sees on like a day-to-day basis of what it means, but it really means like mercy or lenience. And so we'll answer that one last, but expediency, right? I think this one's relatively obvious that we pointed out many examples of like alarm bells, right? That is a direct expediency. And so he is supporting it with expediency. We can rule that out, right? Posterity, right? To mean for the future and long term. In the passage, he does talk about how this needs to be fixed for our generations and the generations beyond it, and that this will have a lasting impact of the changes we can make now to preserve nature. So there is posterity. And then consistency. Does anybody recall any examples of where consistency was mentioned? And totally okay or not. If not, I know you guys don't have the passage in front of you, but there is a consistency in there's a phrase that he uses in the middle of it where, so not necessarily the tone change, but he talks about all forms of art, right? He says, there's a phrase in there that's something about how we don't destroy treasured works of art, but we destroy nature. And so the author wants to emphasize that there needs to be consistency in our priorities and the things that we preserve, and that we value all on the spectrum of art to nature. And so just like you all pointed out correctly, right? The answer to this question is A, clemency. There's no moment in this passage where he's suggesting mercy or leniency. In fact, the opposite. This author wants laws to force people to respect nature, the very opposite kind of clemency. So I know all these questions took a really long time in this passage, but it goes with the point that it's okay to take your time as long as you rule out the answer. And I think question 36 was a great example of that, right? Sometimes it felt like B was going to be the right answer, and you can make a good argument, but when you went through each one, you realize that actually D was the right answer to the question. So I think in the last 4 minutes that we have, I'm happy to take questions, but I also want to give some time for Andrea as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I think we do so many of these, and every time we come on, I learn more and more. Just before we go into the Q&A, we'd love to hear from our audience. So what we're asking is if you could just scan this QR code. It takes you back to a feedback page. I promise you, there's not a ton of questions. And just give us some feedback. We'd love to know what we could have done better, what we did well, and this really allows us to take back this information and just continue to offer better guidance in future sessions, or continue doing something well. So I'll give everyone a minute to do that. Q&A. Okay, so I see some questions. We have about 4 minutes. Let's see how many we can get through. So there's a couple of questions in here, and I'm going to group them. What should you do if you don't understand a specific term? And then there was another question that English isn't somebody's first language, so oftentimes there's some difficult terms to understand, which doesn't really help with lack of context. And this person would love our support and would love to know, what do they do?
Yeah, these are great questions. And I wish I had a better answer, but it's going to stick with the theme of exposure and practice. I think you can, a lot of times, if you're unsure, you can look at context clues, right? If that word that you don't know is in the passage, read all the way around it and try to just figure out what they might be trying to imply. But words like, say, for question 37, which, yes, the answer was A, clemency. If you don't know clemency, you have a couple options. You can kind of guess what it maybe mean, or rule out all the other ones, right? And sometimes it's okay. You're not going to get every single question right, but do your best to get the ones that you do know and get them right. But if you do want to work on the kind of the vocabulary and the comprehension part, just being exposed to different types of writing, like this specific passage, the chance that you read something like that on a normal offhand day-to-day basis is relatively low. So you're going to have to seek out passages like this through cars practice, or just kind of reading the newspaper or different books to be exposed with material like that.
Awesome. So there's another really great question. Are there any keywords and answer choices that may be automatically incorrect that you have used to eliminate obvious wrong answers?
I wouldn't say there's any like blanket keywords that you'll see in answer choices, because the AMC does their best to avoid kind of things that maybe carry on over time. Like they want you to, kind of keep you on your toes. I think one thing to look out for is answers or questions with answer choices that are directly contrasting, like A and then B is the direct opposite of A. Chances are it's going to be one of those two. And so keep an eye out for those is maybe what I would say, but you're not going to see any like keyword that can automatically rule out an answer.
Another really great question is, can you apply any of these principles to dissecting science passages?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. And I think over the time, the MCAT actually has kind of expanded like this, where like cars has like, spread out into the other sections, and that the science passages get longer and more dense as we go. So yes, I absolutely encourage you to read the science passages in a similar way, be able to explain it, especially when it comes to the figures and the tables, be able to know what the heck it's showing you and explain it in a similar way that you'd be able to explain a cars passage to someone else. Because just by, especially with science patches, right? Kind of like just reading the text or just reading the figures, you're only going to get half the information. And that can really hurt you when it comes to the question time. So if, again, my takeaway, I think for all of you tonight is that the time you invest in dissecting and understanding the passage will actually save you time on the back end when you answer the questions. I know it's easy to just jump to the questions because that's what matters and that's the important part, but you'll spend longer if you didn't spend the time to understand the passage.
Amazing. So we're right on the hour. Just before we let everyone go, is there any other question, or for our audience, any other questions? But is there any other piece of advice that you have for those viewing this? Anything that we may not have covered, or anything you'd like to elaborate on?
Yeah, I mean, good luck to you all. This is a long journey. Practice does make perfect in this sense. And whether or not you work with a tutor or whatever you do, I encourage you to find somebody, right? Whether it's a study buddy or a friend or someone else taking the MCAT. Accountability is really important, and will help you keep on track when you go through this medical school admissions journey. If you have any additional questions or anything else, feel free to reach out to the Inspira people, and I'm sure they'll be happy to pass along the message to me or any other counselor.
Of course, you know it. Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a lot of thank yous in the chat, so I hope you see that. We love doing these. We actually have we're working, just before I let everyone go, somebody wants to ask a question real quick. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. But just so our audience knows, we are doing a ton of workshops. So what our plan is, and I'll just give this person a second to get that last minute question in, is we're going to break down the MCAT into mini sections, so workshops basically similar to this, just on various questions or various sections of the actual test. So there's a question in here about organic chem. So we actually will be running a webinar about organic chem, for example, and kind of basically similar to this. So leave that with us, and hopefully you'll be able to join that. Okay, this is a really great question. I joined the webinar for the chem physics section. There we go. And I'm wondering if there's an exam for that as well that you guys give us like you did. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We can make sure that in the follow-up that includes this recording, somebody asked if this was recorded. Yes, and we can make sure to give you a lot more information as well. And in terms of the other section meeting links, I can email everyone because we have them coming up in February and March, and we kind of spread them out a little bit. So another really great place to check is just to keep up to date with our website. And if you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, every week we share upcoming webinars in there. So, or you have my email, so shoot me an email and I can send you any and all the meeting links that we have coming up. That being said, I will let everyone go. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.